I want to begin by quoting Jane Urquhart, who's a well-known Canadian writer, very good writer. And some years ago, she wrote a novel called The Underpainter. And she describes the life of this artist called Sarah. And she's living on an island by herself because she's in a depression, and she's had a long-standing relationship with this other artist, and the art it's just soured, and she's living on this island, not knowing what she's going to do with the next part of her life. And I want to read you a quote. The person, her friend, says, "Sometime during the summer of 1935, the last summer I spent on Silver Island, Sarah told me what it was like to wait. She said that there's two kinds of waiting. The waiting that consumes the mind and occurs somewhere below, one that consumes the mind, and another that occurs somewhere below the surface of awareness. The latter is more bearable, but it's also more dangerous, because it manifests itself in ways that are not as definable as the first. She told me that over the period of the last winter, she had finally come to the realization that everything she said and did, every activity, was either a variant of or a substitution for waiting, and therefore had no relevance in itself." She says there's two kinds of waiting. There's a waiting we're conscious of, and there's a waiting that's underneath. And a lot of times, I want to talk about waiting before we go into the Eucharist as a vigil. We're waiting, the early Christians said, we're waiting for Jesus to return. That's an image. We celebrate Eucharist to wait for Christ's return. We say that, Christ, we celebrate until you come again in glory. What are we waiting for? Well, first I want to talk about just the importance of waiting and the kinds of waiting. So Urquhart says there's two kinds of waiting. There's a waiting we're conscious of. And I'm going to say later on, there's doing vigil we're conscious of, a funeral vigil. You're at the plane station waiting, or plane airport, for somebody to come. You're waiting consciously. Most of our lives, in fact, we are waiting unconsciously. Henri Nouwen, great spiritual writer, Henri Nouwen says, we spend about 98% of our lives waiting for something else to happen to us. And I think he's right, and in big ways and small. So Nouwen says it's rare that we're inside of what he calls a fully pregnant moment. And a fully pregnant moment is this. If you're sitting someplace and you say, right now, I don't want to be any other place, with any other people, in any other situation in my life than right now, you're in a fully pregnant moment. But that might happen 2% if you're lucky in your life. And the other 98%, we're in one state, we're in one place, and we're waiting for something else to happen, in small ways. So you're at the bus stop, you're waiting for the bus to come. You got put tea kettle on and you're waiting for it to boil. You're waiting for your husband to come home from work. You're at work and you're waiting for the coffee break. You're sitting in a class and you're waiting for it to end. Okay, and on and on. See, we're waiting. We're at the airport. You're waiting for the plane to come in. You're at the airport. You're waiting for your plane to take off. Those are smaller kinds of waiting. But we spend a lot of our time. Or you're in the bank line and you're waiting. There's 4 people in front of you. You're at the checkout counter. I don't know if you're familiar with, he's a wonderful intellectual, James Hillman. And Hillman's in his 70s now, and he wrote this wonderful book on aging. And he says, as you get older, he says, you get more impatient. And he said, you have a right to get impatient. He said, I'm in my 70s. He says, now when I go to the bank and there's 6 people in front of me, I say to myself, who the hell are these people? Okay. And why do they have to be here just now? See, so we're always waiting. But those are in small ways, okay. See, that's what Eckhart says, where we're conscious, we're waiting. A lot of times we're not conscious, we're waiting, but we're waiting. So you're in one stage of your life, but you're waiting for it to end. You're in high school, but you're waiting to graduate. You're in college, you're waiting to graduate. You're in college, but you're waiting to meet somebody that you're going to fall in love with and marry, Then you get married and you're waiting to have kids. And then after you have kids, you're waiting for them to leave home. Okay. And, or you're waiting for, your mother's health to improve, or you're waiting for your health to improve, or you're waiting for your relationship to straighten out, or you're waiting to get your degree, or we're always in one season of life, but we're waiting for something else. See, and when we're waiting, we're always keeping unconscious vigil. You're in one state of life, and we're always waiting for something else to happen. I want to read you a little quote from Henri Nouwen. Nouwen says, "Our life here in this world is but a short time in expectation, and it's a time in which sadness and joy kiss each other at every moment. There's a quality of sadness that pervades all the moments of our life." Listen to this line. He said, "In this life, there is no such a thing as a clear-cut, pure joy." In this life, there's no such thing as a clear-cut, pure joy. But even in our most happy moments, there's a tinge of sadness. In every satisfaction, there's an awareness of limitations. In every success, there is the fear of jealousy. Behind every smile, there's a tear. In every embrace, there is loneliness. In every friendship, distance. In all forms of light, there is knowledge of surrounding darkness. See, we're always waiting for the fullness, or as Karl Rahner puts it so strongly as only Rahner could. Rahner says, in the torment of the insufficiency of everything that's attainable, we ultimately learn that here in this life there is no finished symphony. See, so that we never quite get the finished symphony, so we're always waiting for something else to happen. Or most of the time we're waiting for something else to happen. So waiting is a very, very important part of our lives. And it's also a very, very important part of Scripture. You know, one of the things we've done, and we've done violence to the New Testament sometimes, is that we haven't brought this motif out, and it's so clear in the New Testament. You know, in the New Testament, there is just a strong, constant motif of waiting. You know, Jesus went away, we're supposed to wait till he returns. And we've even changed the language sometimes to water it down. So Jesus says in Matthew 25, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to 10 virgins. You know, and now we changed the word to handmaidens, you know. Whatever a handmaiden is, I'm not sure. But the Greek word, there's, you know, 10 virgins. We're waiting for consummation. We're waiting for something else to come to, you know, the whole idea is virginity. It's an incomplete state of life. It's not good for the person to be alone. So we're waiting for something else to happen. And the 5 foolish virgins don't wait. The 5 wise virgins, they wait. So waiting is such an important part. And in the whole history of spirituality, so that, you know, in Jewish spirituality, in Jewish mysticism, they have this wonderful, I often use this slogan in Advent, where the Jewish mystics say, every tear brings the Messiah closer. And they have this idea that, you know, a quota of tears has to be cried before the Messiah can be born. So you got to wait. There's a gestation process, and it's hard, and you have to wait. Every tear brings the Messiah closer. Or those who, older Catholics, you'll remember the very famous prayer, the Salve Regina, a prayer which my parents said every day of their lives, you know, and part of it is, for now we live mourning, weeping in this valley of tears. I know some contemporary Catholics who say, Christians say, that's morbid. I don't say that, you know. I think we're pretty wise to say it, because we are, you know, it's not that life is morbid or it's not happy, but as Nouwen says, there's no sense pretending we have the finished symphony or that we can even ever get it, because when we try to get it, we start doing violence to life. You know, for instance, in everything. Your marriage, you may be married to a wonderful person. You are not married to eternity and to God. You're just married to a person. They can't take your loneliness away. They can't make you happy in every aspect of your lives. They can't take your restlessness away. Neither can a job, a career, kids, whatever. You know, Augustine, you've made us for yourself, Lord. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. So until we're embraced by God fully in the next life, you know, there's always going to be unfulfilled, inconsummate areas inside of ourselves. We're the virgins, you know. Whether we're sleeping alone or not sleeping alone, we're always sleeping alone in some way. Okay. See, so we're always waiting. And you have that also in anthropology. You know, in anthropology, there's wonderful images. And in fact, you were familiar with them. We oftentimes don't realize what they mean. For instance, the story of Cinderella. You know, some of these fairy tales are 5,000 years old, and they contain the psychological and spiritual wisdom of people before we had Scripture and had contemporary psychology. And Cinderella is one of those stories. For instance, Cinderella is a story of Lent. That, You know, first of all, Cinderella isn't the name of anybody. Cinder is ashes, and Puella is the girl who sits in the ashes. So it's Puella, the eternal girl who has to sit in the ashes. And there has to be this so much humiliation stuff before she can get the glass slipper and meet with the prince and get married. See, in all fairy tales, you always have that great tension, you know, and there's got to be humiliation and ashes before you can get to the ball and so on. That's our season of Lent. Lent is really, you won't get a better image for Lent than Cinderella. We're asked to sit in the ashes for 40 days and 40 nights before we go to the ball and put on the glass slipper, you know. See, those are all motifs of waiting, waiting, waiting. It's going to come, but not yet. Now, in religion today, one last thing before I go into the Eucharist as a vigil of waiting. I agree with certain spiritual writers who will say that this may be the aspect of spirituality today that we've lost that most needs to be restored. And because there's also a lot of frustration because we don't get this. You know, for instance, I'm convinced that the younger generation, you know, because we haven't taught them this, we haven't given them the symbolic tools to handle frustration in their lives. And there's just a lot of breakdown and breakup and violence and so on, because, you know, and that's not abstract. Today, I feel sorry for kids. They're raised, and we bring kids into the world, and we tell them, you can have it all. You can have a perfect body, and all the girls are going to look like Julia Roberts, and all the boys are going to look like whoever, Tom Cruise or Leonardo DiCaprio, or wherever your hero is, and so on. And you're going to have a perfect body, a perfect career, perfect teeth, perfect husband, perfect kids. The sky is the limit, you know. And in fact, our lives, no matter who we are, even if we're Tom Cruise and Julia Roberts, they're circumscribed and they're limited and so on. And lots of stuff happens in our bodies, our marriages, our lives don't turn out at all like the fairy tales. And we're not symbolically equipped to handle that. My parents were, you know, or if you were a Protestant growing up a generation ago, we had a working theology of original sin. They say, well, no, that's the world. Adam and Eve ate the apple. It screwed up the whole world. And so we're going to be unhappy, you know. Or my parents prayed this prayer, you know, now we live mourning in a valley of tears. So, you know, if you take joys when you can get them, but a lot of times you don't get them. And there's just real limit because we're waiting for something else to happen. See, now we've cut off that dimension of waiting, and then life has to produce the finished symphony, and it can't do it. You know, as soon as you cut off the dimension of waiting, which is expressed in the New Testament, we don't know what that expression means, but it's expressed in the New Testament. Say, Jesus is coming back. So our lives are partly on hold. We're supposed to live and enjoy ourselves, but realize partly it's all on hold because Jesus is coming back. Remember, the last thing Jesus says is he goes off in the clouds, however he went off in the clouds. And he says, keep your eyes fixed. I'm coming back, you know. See, so without that dimension, we can't explain our lives because we long and everything inside of us is for the finished symphony and we never get it, you know. And so that's, I think, where we failed our kids in some ways and failed the younger generation of Christians, where we haven't equipped them to handle real frustration, which they're all going to meet, you know. Not a question of are you going to be frustrated in life, it's only how bad are you going to be frustrated in life, you know. Now, the Eucharist, for the early Christians, and this was one of the central features of Eucharist, they met and they did Eucharist together. Why? In order to hold a vigil, you know, to wait for Christ's return. So the idea was we're keeping vigil. The Eucharist is meant to be a vigil. I want to quote a famous German scripture scholar, Gerhard Lofink. He says, the early apostolic communities cannot be understood outside of the matrix of intense expectation. They were communities eminently awaiting Christ's return, and they gathered in Eucharist for, among other reasons, to foster and sustain this awareness, namely, that they were living waiting for Christ to return. See, so the early Christians, they met, and a very important part of that meeting was where we meet to do vigil, that the Eucharist is a vigil. Let's look at that. What does it mean to do vigil? Okay. Well, first of all, as Jane Urquhart says, you can do vigil consciously and you can do vigil unconsciously. I'm going to give you examples of both. Okay? See, now first of all, to do vigil means this. We do vigil whenever we're waiting for someone or something to come and change our lives so as to make them more complete. You know, just remember that definition. We're waiting, we're doing vigil whenever we're consciously or unconsciously waiting for someone, Jesus in this sense, Christ, or something to come and change our lives so as to make them more complete, because we're always living incomplete lives. So let's look at that consciously. And I'm going to give you some examples of unconscious vigil. You go to the airplane and one of your children has been serving overseas and they've been in Iraq for a year and they're coming home. So, you know, you're at the airport and all your friends come and you get 50 people with balloons. And while you're waiting for that plane to come in, you're doing a vigil. You know, you're at the airport and you're waiting, plane's going to land in 45 minutes. And you're all there and you're waiting and you got the balloons and your daughter's going to walk through the gate at, 9:35 this evening. So you got 45 people and you're there. You're doing a vigil. You're waiting for your daughter to come home. And see, you've missed her. Something's been missing from your life. And when she comes home, this missing part comes back. Okay? Vigil. Or we talk about a vigil the night before a funeral. So you have the funeral liturgy the next day. The burial is not the vigil. The night before we bury somebody, oftentimes, not always, but a lot of times in the normal practice, you have a vigil. So people meet at the church. They don't necessarily celebrate Eucharist or whatever. And you have eulogies, and then you go to the house, and you talk about this person and so on. We're keeping vigil. How? Well, not necessarily waiting for this person to come back. They were waiting for something else to happen. We've lost a loved one. People are hurting. We missed this person, and they're not coming back this life. And so we meet, and we're waiting for this situation to get better. Time heals everything. And so you're consoling the family, you're with them and so on, because part of being vigil is also, see, you don't do a vigil alone, or you can't really do proper vigil alone. You can, but it's not very powerful. It's like Schopenhauer said, the great philosopher. Schopenhauer says, anything can be borne if it can be shared. You can bear anything if you can share it. So you're with these parents, they lost a son in a traffic accident, You're at the funeral vigil, you're there with them, they're in unbearable pain, you're in pain. See, there's a radical incompleteness. That pain is going to pass, or at least it's going to go away in its radical intensity. And during that time, it's important that people be around the family. It's important, we're waiting for something to come. We're waiting for something to come to shuffle the chemistry, to change the situation, to take away some of the pain, to fill it, And see, those are conscious vigils. So when your daughter's coming back from Iraq, you're at the airport, that's a conscious vigil. You're there, she's going to walk through the gates at 9:35. When you're at a funeral, that's a conscious vigil. You're waiting for something to happen. Now, liturgy, Eucharist, is meant to be a conscious vigil, but usually it's unconscious as a vigil. That's why it still works. But let me give you an example now of some unconscious vigils. Okay? And I want to use a real clear example. And I want you to take this example as, it's an analogy of what Eucharist is meant to be. Imagine 3 young women. They're in their late 30s, okay? Single, unmarried, college friends, okay? So they're in their late 30s, they're not married, and neither of them has immediate marriage prospects. It just hasn't worked out for them that way, And they're unconsciously aware that their biological clock is running down. There's only so many years they can have kids, and that type of stuff we don't have any choice on. Biology and nature is really, really powerful, and stuff is starting to speak unconsciously inside. If you're a woman in your late 30s, you don't have kids, you can't pretend that's not an issue. It simply is an issue. Okay, nature will make sure it's an issue. You can deny it, doesn't matter. Okay, so they're not married. They're good college friends. None of them have immediate, but they're very good friends. So they don't call it a ritual, but every Friday night after work they get together. And they do different things. Some nights they go to a movie, go for pizza afterwards. Other nights they just go from work, they meet in a bar, have a little, pizza and beer there and make a night of it, sit around. Some nights they go to one of the houses and they watch a video, and on the surface, a lot of stuff is happening. They're talking about old college days and how their work went and how they're feeling about different things. They might never talk about, what's really happening in their lives. They're together and they're talking about college days and humoring together and eating food together and doing all kinds of things together and so on. And on the surface, they're eating pizza and drinking beer and so on. Under the surface, they're keeping vigil. They might not know they're keeping vigil. They might even know they're keeping vigil. What are they doing? They're meeting with each other. Very important. And at a certain point, it becomes a ritual. They're meeting every Friday night. And in that, they're waiting for something, somebody, not necessarily even marriage, but somebody to come and change that certain incompleteness, which they're feeling biologically, they're feeling it psychologically, emotionally, and so on. And that can't stay like that. Something has to come and alter that, See, they're feeling what Nouwen says. In this life, there's no such thing as a complete, cut, pure joy, except they're feeling at this. And their being together is a very, very important. They're sustaining each other in that, or helping to sustain each other in that. As graphic as it was sometimes, for instance, Sex and the City, that wasn't always the most sacred piece of stuff you could watch, but in some sense, it had some very powerful, these were good friends who kept vigil with each other. That's true for all of us. In the end, we're all single. Doesn't matter your age, 30-something, the chapter of our lives. You may be in a very good chapter of your life right now. You're still young, you're still healthy, and so on. That's not going to last. And unconsciously, we know that. Unconsciously, we know that we got to prepare for something else. We're going to age. Someday we're going to die. All of that is, we're going to lose loved ones, so on. Your family's going to die. You're going to die. All of that is unconsciously there. And part of meeting in Eucharist, and a very, very important part, is we are waiting for Christ to come back. That expression, for Christ to come back. It means for us meeting Christ in our death, unless the world ends before we die. But it means many things. It means for something, somebody to come into our lives to reshape us so that we can move on to this next chapter. And when we don't keep vigil, we often aren't ready for the next chapter of our lives. Age catches us unaware. We're 50 and we're not ready to be 50. We're 60, we're not ready to be 60. We're 70 in arthritis and in a wheelchair, we're not ready to do that. And we want to be 20 and back in high school. And it doesn't help to want that. You're not going to get it. Okay? See, we're keeping vigil. Now, I want to give you a second analogy. Quaker liturgies. The Quakers have a liturgy that in fact does this very, very explicitly. What they call a Quaker silence. Okay? So what a Quaker silence does is people sit in silence in prayer, but as a community. You do it as a community, and you sit, and the idea is you ask God to come and give you something that you can't give yourself, which is many things. First of all, we can't give ourselves community. We can't give each other love. We need God to help do that. Communities can't sustain themselves, and so you sit and you wait for God to come and give us something we can't give ourselves, which is meaning, community, and also here fulfillment. We all live longing, unfulfilled, no finished symphony, waiting for something else to happen, waiting to get married, waiting to have children, waiting for the children to leave home, waiting to get our degree, waiting for our health to improve. There's always something has to be reshaped. Something is missing from our lives. And we meet in Eucharist as one of the central reasons we meet is for that. We're asking God and we're asking community to sustain us. We go there to sustain each other. But we are going to be with other people and they with us to help sustain us in our incompleteness. To help sustain us in the fact that, we're mortals living incomplete lives and one day we're going to die. That's what it means. We're waiting for Christ to come back. And that's not just, and we're meant to take that out of the Eucharist. Like I said, the perspective. My parents, who weren't educated and so on, and they lacked some other theological sophistication, but they understood that. They understood that real well. That you go to church and you also say this prayer, we live in a valley of tears, that puts a dimension to your life which doesn't make you morbid at all. That's the misunderstanding of our culture. To say that prayer makes you morbid, no. It actually helped them appreciate and enjoy life. They could enjoy the joys they were given because they didn't have to ask for more. You can enjoy your marriage and your married partner if you're not asking, demanding unconsciously that this person be God and take your loneliness away. You can enjoy your job if you aren't asking unconsciously that your job be the Messiah for you. See, one of the dangers now and called that we have a false messianic thing, and that is we're always, looking for a Messiah, a marriage partner which will take my loneliness away, a job that's going to give me complete fulfillment, a vacation that's really going to be the answer to all my problems, and so on. So it always has to be, we're looking for a Messiah, and no vacation, no person, no marriage partner, no lover, no friend can ever do that for us. They can help, and in fact we'll enjoy them a lot more and be a lot more appreciative and do less violence to them when we accept the fact of what they can't do. Nobody can make you unlonely. Nobody can make you complete. Nobody can make you fulfilled and not be waiting for something else. And when we accept that, then we're much more at peace with the people who are in our lives. And you say, no, my marriage isn't heaven, but it's a good marriage. My job doesn't honor fully my talents and all my creativity and so on, but it's a good job, gives me a living, and so on. See, now, to have this idea, it's very, very important. The Eucharist is meant, we get together to console each other. Notice that the three women, the example I used, they don't know it. They're getting together each week to console each other. But they're not different than the rest of us. We also need to get together every week. They do it Friday night. We do it Sunday morning. Okay. We get together to console each other for our incomplete lives as we wait for a completeness that we don't have yet. The Quakers just do it up front. Our lives are incomplete. We can't make community. We can't love each other properly. We can't make justice in the world. So let's just sit here and wait on God. Let's sit and wait for God to help us. And we'll do it together. Other people who understand this too are Alcoholics Anonymous. In a lot of 12-step groups. What you see in a lot of 12-step groups, you see this. I've only gone to meetings, as an invited guest and so on. But at an AA meeting, nothing new is ever said because it's a ritual process. If you go to an AA meeting, you're not going to learn anything new. It's going to be exactly the same as every AA meeting that's ever happened ever. I'm Joe and I'm an alcoholic and here are my problems, and I'm Martha and I'm alcoholic and here are my problems. It's the same thing every day, every year, and so on, but it works. See, it's ritual. And the alcoholics are wise enough to know, if I don't do that, I'm going to start drinking again, and eventually I'm going to die. But some alcoholics say, I go to an AA meeting, I go there because it keeps me alive. I know if I stop doing it, I don't learn anything new, You go there because the ritual of being with other people, and notice you can't do it alone. One of the things that AA has taught us, we knew it in spirituality from people like Augustine, except we never really realized what it meant. And that is that you cannot change your life by willpower. You can only do it by grace and community. For instance, you cannot will yourself to stop any addiction. But if you are with other people who sit in the addiction with you, you can stop it, And it's the only way you can stop it, okay? That's Christian Eucharist. I cannot get rid of the incompleteness of my life alone, and neither can you, and neither can the 30 single something woman. You can get rid of it by being with other people. See, in some sense, Eucharist, sometimes I've gotten into trouble. People have got ballistic sometimes when I've said this, but the Eucharist is an AA meeting, And that's why all the Eucharists are the same, You should walk into Eucharist and say, my name is Martha, and I come here because if I don't come to Eucharist, I'm going to die. I'm going to fall apart somewhere, And I don't expect to learn anything new here, And I'm John, and I come to the Eucharist because my life is incomplete, and I'm frustrated as hell in almost every aspect of my life, and it's going no place, and it sure as hell's got to get better or I'm going to fall apart. And I come here every week because if I don't come here every week, I'm going to fall apart and kill somebody or myself. You know, that's the Eucharist. That's why the Eucharist, they're all the same. You don't need new words. We don't need a lot of stuff. It's a ritual process. It's the same kind of dynamic as happens at an AA meeting. And see, AA meetings are vigils of waiting. We're going to get through life together. We have struggles, we have pains, we have addictions, we have helplessness and so on. And alone, I'm going to fall apart. If I'm with a group, if I get together regularly with other people, I'm going to make it. It's the same with Eucharist, you know. Alone, we are not going to make it. Alone, we are not going to make it on this planet. And our incompletions are going to hang us, and they're going to kill us, and we're going to fall apart and die in some way. Die internally, die to anger, blow my head off, you know, blow my head off, my steam off at other people and alienate myself. I need to be with other people. And the Eucharist that's the ritual. It's the AA meeting. Some people need it every week. Some people need it every day. You know, as a priest, my last point here, and then we're going to wrap this up. As a priest, I've always found it interesting to see who comes to Mass when you have daily Mass, you know. And there isn't one kind of people. It's always a very motley group of people, you know, who come to Mass every day. So you get some businessmen and they're on their lunch break. You get some retired sisters. You might have, you know, a couple of young people. You got a housewife who's bringing her kids. You got a couple of retirees, you know. You got a couple of street people and so on. Just wide variety. A nurse who's just getting off her shift and so on. You know, there's no categorization in terms of they're all different kinds of people. You know, there isn't one kind of person who comes to daily Mass. But I'll tell you, people who come to daily Mass and sustain that habit, you know what the commonality is? It's their expectation when they come there. And sometimes priests unwisely don't recognize that. People who come to daily Mass are not looking for a Sunday Eucharist and all kinds of flares and new. They want a ritual that's clear, short, with clear expectations, and is exactly like the same as the one the day before. They are like the AA people. They don't want to suddenly say, no, we're going to shuffle this meeting all the way around. You know, the way you always come and say, I'm John and I'm Martha and so on. No, we're going to do it's all different today, you know. That's a quick way to kill an AA group, you know. They'll be looking for another meeting. See, they're coming unconscious like the AA people. I'm here, it's my lunch break, I got 20 minutes, but it's very important that I be with these people today. It's very important to see. And that's their unconscious expectation, and it functions ritually in that way. And see, and it's a ritual of waiting. We come there because our lives are incomplete. And don't apologize about that. None of us have complete lives. And if we go with other people who also have complete lives and we wait together, we're doing Eucharist. You know, the early Christians, they were pretty lost when Jesus left. And so when Jesus left, he said, you know, I'm going to come and I'm going to embrace you. Just meet in you. As we wait in joyful expectation for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. See, that's what we do in Quaker silences. That's what we're doing in AA meetings. That's what we're doing when we're meeting as 30-somebody single Sex in the City groups. We're waiting in silent expectation for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and that's what we do at Eucharist. And I think it's a dimension of Eucharist we've lost, we need to restore and refine. I want to end with the image that I began with again, the Eucharist as the embrace with many faces. And I began with that story of Mordecai, you know. The rabbi said, if you can't hear words, bring them to me. And they brought him to him, and the rabbi held him close to his heart for a long time, and he set him down, and then the kid didn't need words. I want to end with a great image from Chesterton. You know, Gilbert Chesterton, great Catholic or Christian apologist, describing the Eucharist. And Chesterton said, imagine this scenario. Those of you who are mothers, you're going to get this immediately. Chesterton said, there comes a time, usually in the late afternoon, he said, where the little child grows tired of playing cowboys and robbers, and that's when the child begins to torment the cat. Okay. See, that's when the little kid gets restless and starts pulling hair out of the cat, you know. He says, then what happens is the child is soon simpering at its mother's pant leg, you know. And as a mother, you've already said 5 times, leave that alone. Get away from there. Stop that. Leave it. Don't. Shut up. Get it. Finally, as a mother, Chesterton said, you have no other move. The mother has to stop what she's doing, and she picks up the child and she holds the child. And after a while, you know, something from the mother will calm the child, and she can set the child down and it'll stop pulling hair out of the cat, at least for a while, you know. She may have to pick up the kid after a while again. Notice, she's already said, stop it, don't do that. Leave that alone, stop whimpering, stop simpering, you know, and finally there's no other option. She's got to pick up the kid. That's the image of the Eucharist. You know, when we walk, I don't care what age you are. When we walk up to the Eucharist, we're that kid, simpering, whimpering, pulling hair out of the cat. You know, our lives have all these tensions and so on, and we're with a child with a very, very tense body and soul. And the Eucharist is God's embrace. God, the mother in this case, picks us up. Christ holds us and then helps take the tension away, you know. And how often do we need Eucharist? Well, how often does the mother have to pick the child up, you know? Sooner or later the tension comes back, you know. But it's a humble image. It's a humbling image, but it's also the image Jesus uses. We're God's children. And like children, our bodies and our lives fill with tension, and we need at times to be picked up. And that's what the Eucharist is. See, and it comes after the words. That's why when you go to the Eucharist, for instance, the Roman Catholic Eucharist, you have two liturgies. You have a liturgy of the Word. First, we try all the words. Okay. and then after the Eucharist of the Word, the liturgy of the Word, we have the liturgy of the Eucharist. After the words come the embrace. You know, that's what Scripture is saying. Stop that. Stop whimpering. Don't pull hair out of the cat and so on. And after a while, it doesn't do any more good. We can't hear it. And God, Christ, has to touch us physically the way this mother touches the child. That's the Eucharist. It's God's embrace with many faces.